Welcome to Please Me, the award-winning bilingual sexuality podcast bringing you bold conversations and big clit energy. I'm thrilled to announce that Please Me is the #1 ranked sexuality podcast in the USA and worldwide. I'm Eve, your host, on a journey from trauma to sexual liberation. Join me and my guests as we dive into conversations around orgasm equality, self-love, body positivity, and essential sexual health education. Let's reclaim pleasure and close the orgasm gap, one empowering conversation at a time. Last week on Please Me podcast, I spoke with Brent Dowlin from Driven to Thrive broadcast about men's health and why sexual health is a critical part of the conversation. It was a refreshingly honest discussion about responsibility, truth, and what it means to show up fully in your body and your life. Today I welcome Xanet Pailet to the show. After spending 26 years in a sexless marriage, Xanet now helps couples reconnect to intimacy, desire, and their creative power. In this episode of my women's broadcast, we dive into sexual empowerment, emotional safety, and why desire doesn't disappear because of age, hormones, or time, but when communication shuts down and the body no longer feels invited into the relationship. As a female host podcast focused on real conversations around intimacy and connection, Please Me is part of the growing movement of women's health podcasts, creating space for honest dialogue about pleasure, relationships, and sexual health. This conversation is raw, eye-opening, and deeply needed. I think you're going to love it, so enjoy. This season, I'm returning to the original format with weekly podcast episodes plus the continuation of a fan favorite roleplay segment at the end of every episode. Always fun, always spicy, and not to be missed. Early access drops every Monday on Patreon with public releases every Wednesday on all major podcast platforms, so set your alarms. Want to ask a question for the Please Me podcast? Join the conversation on Patreon or subscribe to my Substack newsletter for exclusive content, behind-the-scenes updates, and an opportunity to have your questions featured on the show. You can also join the Please Me Health Collective on SDC.com, the world's premier ethically non-monogamous platform for swingers, polyfolks, and more. Use code 37340 for a free trial membership and access to my growing community, including free monthly webinars. Please Me is for mature audiences, so sit back, relax, and surrender to the pleasure of Please Me.
Emotional safety means I'm vulnerable, I'm authentic, I'm able to hear what my partner says without shaming them or blaming them, right? To me, it's really the true foundation of intimacy. I am showing up as my authentic self, and I can hold the space for him or her to show up as their authentic self as well.
Ladies, whether you are just starting your menopause journey or well into it and have questions about hormone replacement therapy, you're not alone. Many women experience vaginal dryness, decreased sensitivity, and urinary incontinence, like leaking when you sneeze, laugh, or exercise. These symptoms can be frustrating and limiting, but they are also very treatable. I experienced this myself and decided to try Parlor Game's topical estrogen and progesterone creams. Within 1 month of consistent use, my incontinence completely resolved. Topical estrogen helps restore tissue health, improve sensitivity, and support bladder control, while topical progesterone supports hormonal balance. If you are ready to stop suffering in silence, check the show notes for the link to Silky Peach, the topical estrogen cream, and Vibrant Third, the topical progesterone cream. I feel relieved and confident again, and I know you can too. I love wearing a bra, said no one ever. If you're tired of discomfort and want a great bra alternative, I highly recommend Cakes. I gave up bras during COVID and searched everywhere for something better, and Cakes is the best solution I've found. They offer adhesive, non-adhesive, and push-up options that give a seamless look under your clothes without straps or discomfort. If you're tired of racing to your car to pull your bra off at the end of the day, it's time to get your Cakes. I haven't looked back, and I know you won't regret it. Check the show notes for the link. Hello, and welcome to Please Me, the podcast that aims to destigmatize conversations about sex and sexual health by turning the sheets into our classroom. Today, I am so excited to welcome Xanet Pailet to the show. She went from being a healthcare attorney to a sex and intimacy coach after leaving her marriage at 50. She realized that desire doesn't die because of age, hormones, or time. It disappears when emotional safety erodes, communication shuts down and the body stops feeling invited into the relationship. I love all of that. And I just want to welcome you to Please Me. Welcome to the show. How are you today, Xanet?
Thank you so much, Eve. I am incredibly excited and honored to be here, and I'm excited about having this conversation with you as well, and all of your amazing listeners.
Thank you. I want to start with emotional safety because that's something that you sort of lead with.
Mhm.
And how is it created and how is it maintained and nurtured in
Mm.
relationships?
Yeah, I think that emotional safety is foundational for really healthy sexual relationships. And when things falter, a lot of times there's issues with respect to emotional safety. So, emotional safety is something that is like everything is a tool that you can learn. For some people, learning how to be like, for me, emotional safety means I'm vulnerable, I'm authentic, I'm able to hear what my partner says without shaming them or blaming them, right? To me, it's really the true foundation of intimacy, intimacy. I am showing up as my authentic self, and I can hold the space for him or her to show up as their authentic self as well. And it also means, Eve, that we learn how to repair when we have conflicts. That is, again, I have a new book, The Sex and Intimacy Repair Kit. And what I say in it over and over again is like, really, the key to creating and sustaining a long term relationship is to learn how to repair when conflicts arise, because that creates the emotional safety as well. So, foundational element in a healthy sexual relationship and long term relationship. Great question.
Absolutely. And, both you and I have been involved in sexless marriages. And yours went on, I think, 26 years. Is that what I remember reading?
Yeah,
And I
it
was,
was like over 2 decades. There are 2 children that came out of that marriage, so it wasn't completely sexless, but yes.
it's interesting that you say that because I also have two children, both of whom were in vitro children. So they didn't
Mhm.
even require sex. So I feel like that may have been like the beginning of the end in terms of our, intimate relationship. I would
Wow.
love to know how that sort of dissipated over time for you. And when was it that you were to the point where you had had enough and were ready to like move on and separate?
Well, I think my story really starts in childhood, like so many of our stories
Mm-hmm.
start. And it's so appropriate to talk about this on this podcast where we're trying to destigmatize, right? Um,
100%.
right. And so I actually had some pretty, for me, intense shame trauma experiences as a little girl. One which was being caught playing doctor in first grade with my best friend, who was came from England, and her mother walked in on us, and then my mother got called and I got punished and also just terribly shamed for it. And then she moved away in second grade, and they never let us play together alone after that. And I just assumed it was because I was such a bad little girl, right? I was so bad and I was so shamed for that. And I think that was actually where it started. And then topping on top of that, and this is something I talk about very openly in my first book, Living an Orgasmic Life, I had an experience with my dog, Lucky, when I was maybe in second grade, right? So maybe it was like a year later. And I already had the experience of being shamed, but he liked to like lick my panties. And, damn, it felt good, right? But I had this experience of shame from what happened the year before and a ton of anxiety because it was like, they were compounded, right? It was like, oh, it felt good. And I was super anxious that I was going to get caught again and that my mom was going to walk in on me. And that began the trajectory of having anxiety around sex. of feeling disconnected from my body, of feeling like it was not okay to experience pleasure in my body. And that kind of carried through, to my marriage, because while I had sex when I was 16, shockingly, it was very uncomfortable, right? So I never had that experience because I was carrying that anxiety around sex into my adult relationships. And that happened in my marriage as well. And there ended up just being a ton of drama and frankly, physical pain around intercourse or anything. I mean, I was just like, I would lay there, just be like, oh, please let this be over. Right. It was painful for me and emotionally painful as well. And then I also had medical trauma, and that's something that doesn't get talked about a lot. That there's a lot of medical, women experience a lot of trauma at the hands of maybe well-meaning gynecologists, urologists, from childbirth, etc. That also causes us to shut down and blocks our sexuality. So it was like the perfect storm of all of these things that were happening at the same time, which just made me be like, I'm done, man. Like, I'm just going to shut my legs. Not that we ever talked about it, but I'm just going to shut my legs and be done with it. And kind of essentially that's what happened by the time I was like 31.
Wow, that's really young, and that's so sad because those are like
Mhm.
such great years,
I
and
know, I know.
but you have plenty more in the future. And
Totally.
I like to think of this as a safe space, so thank you so much for sharing that information. And I know you put it in a book, but it's a different thing to say it out loud, and
Totally.
you really did catch me off guard. I was not expecting the dog story. And I think it's amazing that you can share that information. I myself come from a history of childhood sexual abuse.
Mhm.
So I understand that early traumas really do influence the rest of our adult lives. And
Totally.
if we don't deal with those traumas, they can really carry on and cause havoc in our relationships. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. So, I would love to know how you sort of dealt with all of those traumatic experiences as a child. Was that after
Mm.
you decided to separate from
Yes.
your partner? Because you went from sexless and traumatized to writing a book about having an orgasmic life. I
Right.
would love to know how that connected.
Yeah, no, great question. Yeah, so at age 50, I had, it was really like we became empty nesters. The kids were both in college. I'd had a 7-year plan to leave this marriage, to be honest. And I executed it eventually, and it was the right thing to do for both of us. But I knew, Eve, that like I had to really look at me. Like I hadn't had any time to look at me. I was a mom. I had my own healthcare company at that time, consulting practice, right? I was uh, producing musicals on Broadway. Like I was super busy. And I took all my sexual energy, by the way, and just like as we do, right? I put it into everything else in my life. But, when I left that marriage, I was like, damn, like I'm 50, I'm young, and I'm a very relationship driven person, right? And I got to look at this. Like, I got to take a really hard look at like what the hell is going on for me and how do I fix this? And it was, for me, the way the door that opened for me, which just was not intentional, but it just kind of dropped in my lap, was the doorway of tantra and sacred sexuality. Because I had met someone in New York. I was dating him. He had just gone to a tantra workshop. And he knew that sex was a problem for me, and he was like, I got to talk to you about this. You've got to understand, like, there's this whole new way to explore sexuality, and that was my doorway into sexuality. I won't say that it was like I went from like being totally sexually shut down to having an orgasmic life. That was like, a 7-year period of time of opening up doors and slowly getting acclimated and beginning to like understand where all of these blocks to my sexuality came from, right? I had to work through that. I had to understand There was trauma at the hands of physicians. There was all the anxiety. I mean, I never ever had shared this story about my dog to anybody ever, right? And so like when I was able to start to even like, I mean, I've repressed all those memories. When those memories started coming back and I was able to start sharing them, some of that trauma started to like lessen little by little. And I felt like I was able to come back into my body because I was so dissociated from my body, especially from my pussy, like no connection whatsoever. So it was, it was a journey of slowly awakening, slowly unblocking. I was blessed to have just a huge, wonderful community of people in the Tantra world. And then I started doing other trainings because I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, I'm starting to see shifts inside of myself. I'm starting to recognize that, I don't want to do this like healthcare work at the corporate level anymore. Like, this seems like something that could be an amazing experience for me, to help other women, particularly who had gone through something like I went through, but had nobody to talk to. Like, I had no one to talk to. I had no access to resources. And this was in the 80s, right? So that was like the beginning of the journey. And then, I'm a lifelong learner, right? I'm a lawyer by training, right? So I just was like, I want to learn more. Like, this Tantra thing is really cool. And this embodied sexuality is really interesting, but I don't understand the emotional context. I don't understand trauma. Like, I saw it showing up in my practice, day after day, but I didn't really know how to handle it, right? And so that, one thing led to another, led to another. But through all of these trainings, I was doing my own personal work, right? I was learning how to release my trauma. I was understanding where my emotional blocks were coming from, how my childhood emotional wounds impacted my ability in my marriage to actually relate to my partner, right? And all of those patterns that we brought. So it was a long journey, but it was an amazing journey. It was, in many ways very fulfilling, in many ways very scary and painful.
Yes. And, I love to help women. And a lot of times talk about getting on that road to sexual liberation, right? And it is a road. It's not just one pit stop, right? It is a road and it's a process and it's a journey. And so I love that you talk about it as part of like a 7-year journey. And this is something that, I think for everybody, obviously their journey is going to be different lengths depending on,
Right.
where they are and, how much trauma they experienced, etc. But you have to do the work if you want to have the most fulfilling sex life possible. And that
Right.
goes way back to childhood and looking at where those blocks came from in the first place and how
Right.
can you sort of release those things and become embodied, really, feel like you're in your body, be able to feel the sensations that you're having in your body. So I love that you bring all of that up and that you talk about it being a journey. And honestly, I feel like I'm still on the journey.
Yes, of course. I was just going to say, this is not a 7-year journey. This is a
It's
15-year ongoing journey, right?
exactly. It just goes on and on because trauma is very interesting and it is layered. And so you may heal one layer, but then the onion, peels away and there's another layer underneath. And then you heal that layer and another layer, shows up so that you need to work on, And so
Yes.
it really is an ongoing thing. And I've noticed that through my podcast and talking to amazing women and men like you, who do this type of work for a living and can have these very honest and open conversations, that this has been a healing journey for me too, which I was not anticipating when I started the show in the first place. So that has been a beautiful, beautiful thing. And you talk about tantra, and that is such a wonderful introduction because it also brings in the element of spirituality and
Right.
our bodies are not just physical, right? We have
Mhm.
the mental and the spiritual aspect of ourselves. And so when you can tie all of those things together, you are going to be able to become embodied in a way that's just more expansive, which
Yes.
means your orgasms are going to be even more expansive.
Yes.
So I would love for you to give us some tidbits about your book. Uh, you're the best-selling author, and your book is called Living an Orgasmic Life. I'd love for you to give us some tips on how
Mm.
we can live an orgasmic life.
Yeah, thank you. Um, well, I would say that, I think there's the thread throughout the book are all of the different ways in which you can live an orgasmic life. And a lot of it comes back to being able to connect to your sexual power. And I say that, right, like our sex center, our womb space is the center of our creativity and our power, especially for women. And learning how to connect with that power, however you do that, right? Whether it's with a partner, whether it's solo, whether you're on a medicine journey and connecting with that power. But learning how to connect that power really allows, in my experience, really allows your intuitive energy to start flowing as well, right? You create a whole new energy field. This is my woo woo side. You create a whole new energy field around you, which becomes very attractive to everything that you want to manifest in your life, whether it's financial manifestation, it's relationship manifestation, it's health manifestation. And I think about living an orgasmic life also as being very, very present in the day-to-day aspect of living and being very aware of all of the ways in which you can experience pleasure in your body through all five senses, right? And so a tip would be, if you're feeling like I'm not feeling a lot of pleasure in my body right now, starting really slowly with like maybe you're starting to smell a flower, or I have this, I don't have it on my website anymore, but I used to have this chocolate, I called it a chocogasm, where I led people through like a nice little meditation of smelling and touching and then tasting and letting a piece of chocolate melt in your mouth, right? And so we need to like focus on some of the simpler things that are very embodied and connected to our senses to begin to like feel and come back into our space and into our body. So I think that's, one of the tips. I think another tip I would say, this is overall for women and men, that I think pleasure is our birthright. We were born to experience pleasure in our body and in our lives. And, what I always tell people is if you're not experiencing pleasure, you need to ask yourself why. And you need to take a look at that and see if you can shift that in, some way, shape, or form. Some of the exercises, that book, all of my books is just chock full of different practices and exercises for you to reconnect with your body, to reconnect with your sexuality, to experience maybe some more sexual energy through tantric practices, and then through touch practices, and through sometimes just dressing sexy and putting sexy underwear on, and a sexy bra, because it kind of makes you feel a little more feminine and sexy if you're a woman, right? So those are,
100%.
those are some simple things that can really create more of an orgasmic life.
I love all of those tips. Absolutely starting with the basics, right? And, we do have five senses. So playing with those senses, and I like to say that the whole entire body is an erogenous zone. And you need to figure out what those erogenous zones are for you, right? Maybe it's your feet. Maybe it's the back of your knee. Maybe it's the back of your neck or your earlobes, whatever that may be for you. You need to figure that out and be able to translate that information into the bedroom. And it's really a beautiful practice to be able to figure that out on each other. So I think it's
Mhm.
a really great tool that people can use as well, to really connect to their bodies and all of the erogenous zones that they have. And I'm not, obviously, the genitalia are erogenous zones, but there are others on the body. Our entire body is wired for pleasure. So figuring all of that out is a beautiful thing. Um,
Hmm.
Lingerie, you mentioned lingerie, dressing up, playing, role playing, all of
Totally.
those things can really bring a lot of spice and excitement into the bedroom. And sometimes it's just silly fun, but really laughing is also part of the whole experience and makes it so much more fun. And really, I like to consider the bedroom our adult playground. And so
Hmm.
if we aren't playing and we aren't being silly and we aren't being funny, we're missing part of the fun.
Yeah, and I think that with a lot of couples, sex sometimes creates a lot of drama for them. There's a lot of pressure, right? And it takes the fun away and the laughter away, and they're just feeling like, oh, hard. It feels hard instead of being fun and playful. And yes, things are going to happen, right? In the bedroom that are going to feel awkward, but you just have to be able to laugh about it, right? And
Exactly.
I tell all my couples, like, can we play more? Can we have more fun? Can we play games? Very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can relate to the pressure part because, like I mentioned before, my kids were in vitro. So initially we were trying to get pregnant and trying to get pregnant and trying to get pregnant, which does cause pressure in the
Totally.
relationship. And so really it should be a fun zone, and it's, putting that part aside and putting the pregnancy part and the, fertility part aside, the rest of your life outside of having your children can be a beautiful partnership and experience to connect with your partner and to maintain a really healthy and happy relationship along the way if you do put some time and effort into creating, a beautiful sex life. So I want to talk about some good ways to start a conversation with your partner about maybe introducing things in the bedroom or maybe talking about your sex life, maybe if you haven't had that conversation in the
Yes.
first place, because a lot of times many people have not. And so what would you recommend for the people listening out there to get this conversation started?
Right. Well, I have a conversation started that I created, a conversation starter that I created because I know for so many couples, it's really hard to get the conversation going, right? You just think you're about to open up a Pandora's box. So I created basically an intimacy equation quiz. So it's kind of like a fun little quiz that you can take that helps you determine what your intimacy equation is, like what your style is. Are you somebody who is more emotionally focused? Are you somebody who is more sensually focused? Are you somebody where loyalty and trust is really the key thing? Or is it more kind of adventure? And what I tell couples is like, take the quiz, get some information, and then turn to your partner and say, hey, I took this kind of fun Facebook quiz, right? We all take those kind of personality kind of quizzes. And this is what I am. And I'm super curious, like, curious what you are. Do you want to take the quiz as well? It's a very safe way to start the conversation because it's a fun thing to do. The quiz itself is fun, and then it starts to then you can start to like gently tread into those waters of like, wow, it sounds like you're kind of more adventuresome. What does that feel like for you? Like, do you think we're meeting those needs in the bedroom? And I'm a little more, I want more sensuality. And it's a really sweet way to start the conversation. And I can tell you, this is something I'm going to offer this to all of your audience members as well. You can find this at this website, which is howtoimprovemylovelife.com. Howtoimprovemylovelife.com. It's a very short quiz. It takes like 3 minutes. It's got little gifts on it. It's kind of kitschy cute, but does the job. So that's I think a really good conversation starter for people. And then, obviously, like another foundation for a healthy sex life is really good communication. Of course, you need to have good emotional intimacy to have that, right? But communication is really important, and feeling like you can start to have hard conversations or maybe tricky conversations without blaming or shaming your partner, but just like being curious, right? Like I always like to tell couples, and I use that word a lot in my sessions, like I'm curious about this, or I'm curious about that, right? Because there's no like angle. I'm not angling for anything, right? I'm not trying to manipulate you. I'm just like, I want to know more. I'm a curious person. I want to know, like, how did that land for you? Did that feel good? Or are there things that we're doing that don't feel good? And just starting to have some of those conversations is key to be able to like expand the palette of what sex looks like for you.
Absolutely. I love the idea of the quiz. And so I will definitely put that link in the show notes because I love a good quiz. I take them all the time. I'm always like interested in learning where I fall in the spectrum. I know for sure that I'm going to be in the adventurous category. I can already predict it. But so I'm going to take the quiz and I'm going to see if I'm right or not.
Awesome. Let me know, or let us all know, Eve.
Yes, absolutely, I will. Because I when you said adventure, I was like, "Yep, that's gonna be me. I'm sure that's gonna be me." I like some adventure in the bedroom. But I one of the things that I like to suggest for my listeners and my clients is to find out what your partner's top 3 turn-ons are. A lot of times people are not having these conversations and they don't know. And it's interesting because I just was on a show this morning with a male host. I was on his show and I came up with that suggestion as to something that people can do. And he's been married for 25 years. And he said, I'm guilty. I don't know what my partner's top 3 turn-ons are. And he's been married for 25 years. And so a lot of times people are not having these conversations. And so communication is absolutely essential.
Totally.
It's, I think, the most foundational aspect of having a relationship. Of course, you do have to have emotional safety in order to feel safe to have these conversations. But when you do establish that, and you do bring up these conversations, they get easier and easier as you go. So what's the most important skill? And I think that is basically what we're talking about in terms of maintaining a healthy sex life. We're talking about communication here. Is there anything else?
Yeah. Well, I think this is related to communication, right?
Yes.
So I think my motto is like, repair, 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 right? And that does take emotional safety. It takes attunement, it takes vulnerability, and it takes excellent communication skills. But again, that's a skill that you can learn. And again, so many couples come to see me, and as we start to get into what's going on with their sex life, it's really not what's going on in their sex life, it's what's going on in their relationship, right outside of their sex life. And so often, and this just happens in the context of romantic relationships, we hurt each other. We're always going to hurt each other. We're always going to cause each other pain. But we don't repair it. We don't know how to repair it. And therefore, we build up resentments and anger. And ultimately, or we just like let it go under the rug, but we're still building up resentment and anger. And that starts to have an impact, a very negative impact on a couple's relationship, right? So learning how, taking like, I spent, the new book I just wrote, The Sex and Intimacy Repair Kit, was written that name for a reason, right? Like learning how to do that repair, which is a skill that you can learn, and there are tools that I teach, is critical. Because here's what happens. I've been in this relationship. I think this will be the last one. I've been in a number since I left that marriage for 5 years. And, we'll have a conflict. It's really uncomfortable. There's a lot of pain. We're hurting each other. But at the end of the day, we know we're going to repair that conflict. That's not going to bring us down. We're not going to hold it against each other. And that creates emotional safety, right? That creates more calmness. It might not happen right away, not to say everybody's not going to get triggered, but knowing that you can repair is what creates secure attachment in a relationship as well. It's the security of like, oh, we're going to be okay. Maybe things went crazy for an hour, but I know that we're going to be okay. And not only are we going to be okay, but that process, because we're going to be really vulnerable with each other and let the words go and focus on our feelings, is actually going to create more connection and more intimacy. That's huge in a relationship.
I 100% agree, because if you're not repairing year one, guess what's going to happen to year two? All of
Mm-hmm.
those resentments are going to carry over, and then you're going to have another layer of year two resentments, and then
Right.
year three resentments, and
Right.
then it can become so big that it's just insurmountable, right?
Right.
Or
Totally.
or feels like it is, right? We
Yeah.
can surmount it if both parties are willing to do the work.
Absolutely.
100%. But I love that you're talking about repairing as you go, because absolutely, unfortunately, we hurt the people we love the most, right?
That's
And
right.
when you're often with the same person all the time, that's might be the person that gets your explosion of anger when you're, or whatever it may be,
Yeah.
when you are needing that release, and so I love that you're talking about repairing. And let's talk about repairing in the bedroom, right?
Okay.
What about when things have been that are uncomfortable in the bedroom, and we need to repair that? For instance, let's talk about if a man is having issues with function, and there's a situation that needs to have be worked out. How do you encourage people to have these very delicate conversations? And I often will get a response where they say, well, you don't want to hurt your partner's
Right.
feelings, and it's like, okay, well, if I'm always protecting their feelings,
Right.
what about my feelings? Because
Right.
I'm
Right.
disappointed too. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I
Right.
like to think about the feelings on both sides. So I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that that is a very common scenario that happens, right? A lot of times it happens because one or both parties are feeling a lot of pressure to perform, pressure to give their partner an orgasm, pressure to come, like all of that. Um, and when things go awry, which they often do, like I tell couples, like, just take a pause, right? Just take a pause and say, oops, like, that didn't go, the way we were expecting it to go. That's okay. Right. And, let's maybe come back to something that feels good, and let's take the pressure off of each other. Right. And yes, you want to share your feelings, right? Yeah. Like, I'm kind of disappointed that you lost your erection. That must be hard for you to hear. Right. I don't know that I would say that to a partner personally. I think I would just be like really empathetic and just say, like, well, yeah, like sometimes things just don't go right. Like sometimes erections come and go. I get that. And I think like women do actually really understand that, right? Maybe even more so than men. And they're really, some of them don't care about it as much as, the male partner may, because it's about their ego and their masculinity as well. And so I try to come to that with just a lot of compassion and understanding. And I think I would be personally, I would be like, I would go very light with sharing my feeling around disappointment, especially if I ended up getting satisfied, if that's what, that's where we ended up. um, but really being compassionate to the person who is feeling the struggle, right, and taking the pressure off of them. And just again, like everything that you're trying to do here in this podcast, destigmatizing it, right, making it like natural. Yeah, like, sure, we get it. Sometimes you get hard, sometimes you're soft, maybe you're in your head, maybe you're under a lot of stress. Like, that must really suck for you. But can we just like hold each other? Can we make out? Can we go back to doing something that feels really fun and really good and really juicy for all of us? And maybe today we just leave your cock off the table. I
I
don't know.
love this suggestion so much, because Sex is not just about penetration, okay? And
No.
95% of women need external clitoral stimulation in order to orgasm. Only 3 to 5% of women can orgasm from penetration alone. I say this all the time, right? And
Right.
so if you can't get it up and you can't do penetration, not the biggest of deals if you keep an open mind and you maybe redirect or do something different like you just suggested, like, let's kiss, let's touch each other, let's make out, let's do other things, and this is a great time to introduce toys to the bedroom.
Mhm.
When things aren't, performing at their optimal, you can always bring in toys to help with the experience, and
Totally.
all of that is considered amazing sex. It doesn't just have to be penetrative sex for it to be amazing sex. All of it, the whole entire thing is what makes sex amazing. The connection that you have with your partner, all of the pre-game fun that you have to
Right.
stimulate all of those things. So I'm so glad that you said that.
Yeah, 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 for sure. And I'm a big fan of toys as well. And, I would probably say in that situation, well, you've got fingers and there are dildos, right? Like, if she really wants penetration, like, you just don't have to rely on your penis all the time.
Exactly. It's not the end all be all. And we know that
Exactly.
men love their penises
They
and we
do.
we love them too. We love them too. But it's not the end all be all, and you can have an amazing sex life and still have zero function if you have erectile dysfunction. You can still have an amazing
Totally.
sex life. If you have a flaccid penis, it still feels pleasure. So
And you
thinking
can
about that.
still have an orgasm and ejaculate, right? With a flaccid penis. Those are two physiologically different, elements. So, but, a lot of people, I agree with you, right? A lot of people think about sex as just penis and vagina, and that's it. And so part of our roles is to like really give people an expansive definition of what sex can be. And, that changes everything for people.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
100%.
I love it.
I want to go to your retreats because I understand that you do
Mhm.
retreats. And
I
I would love
do.
for you to share a practice or a ritual that you teach in your retreats that our my listeners can try. And before I say anything more, I just want to say I don't want to do a breathing exercise because, yes, that does embody us and get us into the present moment, but it just doesn't translate well for podcasts. So let's
Yeah.
give me another idea because,
And I would have never thought of doing a breathing exercise either.
okay, good, because mostly that's the first thing that people think of. And I'm
I
like,
know, but I don't think that's necessary. A lot of people can't actually access that very well. So that would not be what I teach. I mean, I do teach a little bit of breath work, but that's not really the element for me. So what I'd like to teach to your listeners is a concept called touching for your own pleasure. So, most of the time, when we touch our partners, we touch them in a way that we think they want to be touched, right? Our energy, our attention is focused outward towards them. And that actually has a huge impact because the touch feels more disconnected to your partner. They're kind of aware that you're doing something that you're trying to touch them in a way that feels good, but they're not really connected to their body. And it's a very common experience. It's why a lot of people, I find this to be true for women and men, but especially women, don't like the way they're being touched because they're being touched very fast or very unconsciously. I used to have a partner who did that, and he would just like touch my knee and rub it back and forth, and I'd slap his hand. I'd say, just stop. It's like, you're driving me crazy. Don't do that. I mean, I did it nicely. That was when we were driving in the car. However, so the concept of touching for your own pleasure, and this is something that when I teach it often, I just did it this weekend on one of my retreats, I teach it with an inanimate object, right? So if you pick up an inanimate object, a water bottle, for example, right, and you close your eyes and you start to touch this object, in a way that feels good for your hand. So you think about using this object, or in the case of your partner, using a part of your partner's body with their consent that actually feels good for you. And you're focused on your own sensation in whatever body part that you're using to touch, whether it's your hand or your tongue or your lips or, your boobs or whatever it is, right? And that really, really shifts the paradigm for so many different reasons. First of all, it creates what I call a pleasure circuit, right? So if you're touching your partner in a way that feels good for them, they're like, oh, wow, okay, I'm feeling your turn on. You feel their turn on. They feel your turn on, right? And you create this circuit of pleasure, which is really important. And number two, and I find this particularly true for some women, and even men, like, giving a blowjob, for example, right? So we have that pejorative word, blowjob. It's like work. But if you, right? But if you switch the paradigm potentially, and you say, like, I'm going to take this penis and put it in my mouth and just really focus on what feels good for my mouth and my lips and my tongue, right? It really changes the experience of doing something for them as opposed to doing something for you as well. And that is a huge paradigm shift. And it's a much more embodied way of touching your partner that will really change things. And I see that all the time when I work with couples, and like all of a sudden I ask, oh, that touch, that first touch felt like maybe a 4. And then when they touch their partner with their own pleasure, it goes up to an 8 or a 9. Wow. That's a huge difference in the response that you're actually getting. So that would be the practice I would recommend.
I absolutely love this tip so much because a lot of times we are touching our partner in a way that we want to be touched, right? This is how I want you to squeeze my nipples, so I'm going to do it to you, right? And they're like, I don't like that, And so it's good to have that communication as you go along too, to say, oh, that feels really good. I like how you're touching me, giving them positive reinforcement and positive feedback. And if something doesn't feel good, right? Like the example that I just said, being confident enough to say, I don't like pinching there, or don't touch me there. I like to be touched here instead. Having that openness in your relationship to have these conversations is so essential so that you can really learn your partner. You should know their body top to bottom, front and back, side to side, and if you don't, it's probably because you're not asking the questions or they're not expressing how they feel about the way that you're touching and doing things to them, right? And so I love this tip. It's a beautiful, beautiful tip. So with that being said, I want to jump into our role play because we are running out of time here. And so something that I'm not going to say what we're going to talk about, but what I am going to say is that I'm going to be the male partner in this relationship. We're going to pretend that we are in a relationship, and we're going to be talking about our bedroom issues. And so with that being said, do you have any questions before we get started?
Let's just do it. Let's roll into it.
Okay, awesome. And my apologies for not having a deep masculine voice. I cannot change it. So you're just going to have to use your imagination and pretend that I'm the man. Okay, so here we go. And action. If you've ever wished sex could feel more connected, more intense, or honestly, just more fun, you need to check out Shameless Care. They're a telemedicine company built entirely around sexual health. Real doctors, real prescriptions, and products that actually work. Like Shameless Chemistry, their oxytocin plus tadalafil blend that deepens connection and boosts arousal. Or Shamelessly Aroused, a topical cream with the active ingredient found in men's ED medication, increasing blood flow exactly where it counts. Every order includes a short video introduction from your doctor, transparent pricing, and no subscriptions ever. Just real, sex-positive healthcare that delivers results. Because you're a Please Me listener, you can use coupon code PleaseMe for $15 off your order of any product on the Shameless Care website. Use the code PleaseMe, that's PLEASEME, at checkout to claim your $15 off. Again, that's shamelesscare.com, code PleaseMe. Because great sex shouldn't be complicated. It should be shameless. This episode is sponsored by Shameless Care.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Do you think we can just like stop for a moment and just stop for a moment? Because I'm really feeling really overwhelmed.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Come on over here and why don't we spoon a little bit? Why don't I lay behind you and you lay in front of me and I can just hug you? How does that sound?
Yeah, I think that would be a good way for us just to stop and reconnect for a moment. Thanks for offering that. That'll really help settle me down a little bit. I'm noticing that I do love your touch, Eve, but wow, it feels like
Evan, I'm
Evan,
Evan.
Evan, Evan, Evan. I do love your touch, Evan, but it just feels like we're on two different wavelengths sometimes, and I really felt that tonight, like that you wanted to go like super fast, and you went right for like we started making out, and then you went right to like almost putting a finger in my pussy, and I was just like, whoa, I don't think I'm there yet. And I really want to make sure that we have good communication around, you know, what, at least for tonight, and I know sometimes it's different, like what our pace should be. And I want you to get your needs met, but I really need for you to also hear that my needs just didn't quite get met the way I wanted them to tonight. And I know that's hard to hear.
Well, I appreciate you being honest with me. And yeah, I think I'm just really tired. And I
Mhm.
just kind of wanted to like connect, but I didn't want it to be like a long, drawn out, thing. And so maybe I was moving too fast. And so is that something that you feel like has been happening not just tonight, but is it something that's been happening in the past? Because I definitely want to make sure that I'm, happy. I'm here for you throughout the whole experience. So, is this something that you've noticed in the past?
I think it's happened sometimes, and it's helpful for you to tell me that like you were really tired and you kind of just wanted to get off, and maybe that's why I sometimes feel, really rushed. And I do really often enjoy when we have longer foreplay. I just feel like, it takes a while for my body to settle down and for me to get really relaxed enough to feel sensation. And I know that there are things that really turn me on that have nothing to do with my breasts and boobs and nothing to do with my pussy, but, like touching me on my neck and biting me. And I also understand that sometimes, Evan, like you just want to get off. And I'm wondering if maybe we could talk about those times that you want to do that, like just telling me, like, hey Shanae, like I'm really exhausted tonight, but I really want to have some connection. I really want to, I really want to have an orgasm, and maybe I could just like hold you while you masturbate and just like, participate that way, and there wouldn't be any pressure for me to have to perform, because I'd be totally fine with that if you could just tell me that's really what you wanted. I actually kind of like that idea. How does that sound to you?
I never even really thought about it, to do that in front of you. But
Mhm.
actually, it sounds kind of hot. And I actually think I might enjoy it, especially if you're watching and maybe making eye contact with me. I think that that would actually be a lot of fun. Have you ever thought about this before? Or, um, I actually, you know, now that you bring it up, would actually really love to watch you, and maybe not
Mm.
tonight, but another time, really watch you, touch yourself, because I think it would really actually turn me on too. Is that something that you would ever consider doing?
Yeah, I mean, it feels really vulnerable to do that. So I know how maybe vulnerable it feels for you, but like, as our relationship is deepening, and I think I would love that. I would, I might have to have my eyes closed. But I would love for you to see also like what kind of turns me on as well. And I know that you're probably a little more visual than I am. I like to go deep. I like to close my eyes and go inside a little bit more. But I can imagine that would be a turn on for you, because I know like you like women doing that on porn when you're watching porn, right? So I would be excited about offering that to you, and would love to be able to, assist you, whether you wanted me to touch you. And I was kind of thinking like maybe I would just like sit behind you and hold you and like play with your nipples and maybe touch your penis a little bit, but really like let you do the bulk of the work. Well, I can just be there and supporting you and enjoying seeing you in your pleasure and how you like touching yourself as well.
Well, I'm all for expanding our, repertoire in the bedroom. And so I love this suggestion because, yeah, of course, we're not always going to be on the same page. And, sometimes you may need it, and I may not be, in the mood, and vice versa. Just like tonight, where I feel like I was maybe rushing things along, and I'm sorry that you felt that way. Is that something that you want to try today?
Hmm. Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I think I could probably consider that, because it seems like I'm kind of coming down. And I don't know that my energy is going to rise again. It just sometimes takes me a while, but I definitely, like, I know we're cuddling and I can feel your hard cock against my knee. So I know that this is still important for you. And so, yeah, I definitely would be open to trying that tonight. And let's just like after it happens, let's have a little conversation and find out how it went for both of us, and if it's something we want to do again, or if we want to make adjustments to it, or like kind of how it felt for you just to have me there but not super involved participating. I would love to get some feedback on that too.
I think it's a great idea to check in afterwards. And why don't we, try and set the mood a little bit? Let's put the music on, and let's, put the lights dimly on so that we can see each other. And I think that this is a great time to see if we can connect in this way. And I would love to give you my feedback afterwards. And I definitely am still turned on, and that's why I'm pushing myself or rubbing myself on you still, because I definitely,
I know.
I'm feeling the energy. I'm feeling the energy. I still have the energy. So thank you for offering to do that for me tonight. And so let's have some fun, and we can talk about it on the other side.
That sounds amazing. And you never know. Like I might change, I might switch as well. So let's just be with like be in the flow here, Evan, like we do when we're best, and see where it goes. But I like the intention that we're setting. That feels really good to me. So thank you for that.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being so honest and seen.
Thank you, Evan. That was great. That was fun.
That was a lot of fun, and what a great lesson in like switching things up a little bit, and being open-minded to trying something completely new. And mutual masturbation is a beautiful practice. It
Mhm.
doesn't have to be both people masturbating at the same time. It could be one person watching as a voyeur and the other being the exhibitionist, and that could be a really super amazing turn on, and a perfect opportunity to get your needs met when the other person is just not physically in the mood.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yeah. It's one of the things I like to recommend to my couples a lot at my retreats.
Amazing. So let's make sure that my listeners can find you and find your new book as well.
Hmm. So you can find me at the best way to contact me is at my website, passionateintimacyretreats.com. You'll have contact form. You can look at my books. Both of the books are on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and bookshop.org. And you can purchase them there as well. And I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but I have a special pre-order if this is before March 24th, where you'll get a number of bonuses, one of which is significant, which would be an opportunity to come to my retreat in Costa Rica in 2027. That's a $10,000 gift. If you're interested and this comes out in enough time, make sure to buy the book, send me an email with the receipt, and you'll be entered into the lottery.
Wow, I think I'm going to enter into that. That sounds like an amazing giveaway. And I absolutely love Costa Rica. It's such a beautiful place. So I'll definitely make sure that I include the link to the quiz in my show notes, the link to the books in my show notes, and also put your website in there. And I want to make sure that my listeners can also find me. If you're new to the show, pleaseme.online is my website. It's where I house many different things, webinars that I've done in the past. I have a full sex toy store that are my favorite products. I also have many affiliates that I recommend. So check out my affiliates to support me. All of my shows are on there as well. So, check it out. And I guess with that being said, I want to thank you again, Xanet, for being on the show today. This has been such a fun conversation.
Thank you, Eve, so much for having me. What a delight.
Until next time, everyone.
Are you looking for a sexy date? Look no further than SDC.com. SDC.com is the premier ethically non-monogamous website that is worldwide. It also hosts a wealth of information on sexuality and sexual health, and I host a free live webinar monthly on the site. You can use code 37340 for a free trial membership on me, and be sure to reach out on the site and say hello.
I want to personally invite you to join me on Patreon for ad-free listening, bonus episodes, and early releases. Already there is a lot of bonus content on there with many webinars that I've done in the past and a show that I've never released to the public before. My show is completely self-funded, and when you are able to support me in this way, I'm able to spread my message of body positivity, self-love, and women's empowerment, and empowerment in general around sexuality around the globe. And so with that being said, I appreciate everyone who has already joined Patreon. And if you've thought about joining, now's your nudge to do so.